Good afternoon, all the delegates. We welcome you for the third edition of Rhinoplasty Back to Basics. Today's topics are we're going to speak on three subtopics, which is aesthetic rhinoplasty, dorsal augmentation, and tip reconstruction. The first part will be spoken by Dr. Hina, and remaining two parts will be dealt by Dr. Kshitij Patil, sir. Ma'am, you can start, ma'am.
Hi, am I audible? Hello?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll be talking mainly on dorsal augmentation techniques, as the tip will be dealt by Dr. Kshitij Patil sir later. So mainly my lecture would be focused on dorsal augmentation techniques. Now coming to, are my slides visible?
Yeah, ma'am, you can go full screen.
Okay. Yeah. So, as everybody knows that the various causes of saddle nose can be mainly what come to us are post-surgical or secondary to abscess, trauma, hematoma, some granulomatous diseases like Wegener's granulomatosis, leprosy, or post-surgical, maybe secondary to over-resection of the dorsal septal cartilage during an SMR surgery, or a K-area disjunction during a septoplasty or rhinoplasty. And the primary cases that mainly come are very less. Actually, they usually are patients with Binder syndrome with a premaxillary hypoplasia or probably an ethnic saddle nose or a small nose. So these are the variety of cases that usually come to us. When you see a broad flat nose or a saddle nose, it's not just the dorsal height or the lack of dorsal projection that is there in the patient. There is an interplay of many other small nasal deformities which cause the nose to look like this. For example, due to the progressive loss of septal integrity, the dorsal height is reduced, which further leads to depression and splaying of the middle vault. As you can see in this patient, there's a depressed, flat, broad nose. Along with that, in the middle third, if you see the cartilaginous dorsum, there is depression, which leads to splaying of the middle wall, that is the upper lateral cartilages as well. This further leads to lack of tip support, over rotation of the tip, which when becomes severe is also called as the pug nose deformity. There is also decreased vertical projection of the tip. There is retraction of the columella, and there is widening of the nasal base. So all these deformities together form the saddle nose deformity. Now, the saddle nose deformity, although looks aesthetically very bad, it is also associated with breathing issues. The patient also complains of certain breathing issues because of the internal and external nasal walls being affected. The external nasal walls are being affected because the cartilage strength in such patients is usually weak. That leads to easy collapse and obstruction of the external nasal valve, and the internal nasal valve can be because of the side wall weakening. The side wall weakening leads to an internal nasal collapse. So if you see the airflow patterns in these deformities as compared to the normal, there are certain dead spaces that are created, leading to ineffective breathing. And that's why the patient also complains of breathing difficulty. For example, in saddle nose, you can see your dead space being created. In tip ptosis, the airway flow pattern is severely affected, leading to inefficient breathing. The patient always complains of breathing difficulty. And also in cleft lip noses, this thing is seen. Now, apart from the routine examination that sir has already spoken about in his first lecture of what all to see in a rhinoplasty patient, you assess the face, you analyze the face, look at the proportion, look at the angles. Along with that, you need to palpate, especially in cases of saddle noses. So you need to see the quality of the nasal bones, how short they are, is there any deficiency in the nasal bones, the quality of the cartilages, whether they are weak, the skin is thick, the overlying subcutaneous tissue, how is that? Along with that, you need to see the quality of the skin, whether it is scarred or tight skin, because these all limit our augmentation techniques. Another thing to see is the anterior septal support, which is seen through this simple tip recoil test. With the tip of your finger, just palpate the tip of the nose and look for recoil. Any loss of anterior septum will immediately you'll be able to assess that the anterior septum is deficient and hence the tip doesn't have any support, and one must plan the reconstruction accordingly. Also, one should carefully analyze the photographs of saddle nose patients to look for any dorsal irregularities leading to breaking of these aesthetic dorsal brow tip lines that you can see on the right hand side of the screen. As I mentioned earlier, the skin plays a very important role in augmentation rhinoplasty, because if the skin is very thick, no matter how many suturing, how many tip sutures you take, um, uh, minor concealment through free diced cartilage, it's not going to show up as good as in thin skin patients. So one should always tell the patient preoperatively regarding this limitation due to thick skin. And also, if there is a scarred subcutaneous envelope, then that also limits the space for augmentation, and one must prefer solid grafts in such cases. Once you examine the patient, you should be able to define the deformities. For example, in this patient, as you can see, there is lowering of the bony dorsal profile, the cartilaginous profile. The tip seems to be a little bit droopy. The nasolabial angle is closed. If you see the frontal view, you can see lack of dorsal aesthetic lines here. There's a broad nose. If you compare the intercanthal distance, it is a broad nose. If you see on the basal view, there is some weakening of the right alar cartilage leading to asymmetry in the nostrils. So you should be able to define all the deformities so that you can formulate a plan accordingly. Once you have defined the deformities, next comes deciding the protocol. Why it is important to define the deformities is to decide on what graft material, what technique are you going to employ for this patient. So what we follow is the Daniels famous classification system, which classifies saddle noses into 5 types according to the severity. It starts with pseudo saddle noses and progresses to minor, moderate, major, severe, and catastrophic saddle nose deformities. So I'll be explaining each type and the kind of reconstruction that is required for these cases. So first comes the pseudo saddle, which is the most minor or the most mild type of saddle nose. Here, the septal framework, as you can see in this picture as well, the septal framework is absolutely solid. There is no deficiency. There is no weakening of the septal framework. All you can see is a minor depression somewhere in the supratip area. When you compare the dorsal height from the starting point of the nose and go down, you might be able to notice a slight depression in the supratip area. These kind of irregularities can be easily corrected by free diced cartilage, and these can be naturally found irregularities, or can be secondary to a surgery also. The second type is the minor type, where just minor cosmetic concealment is required. It is slightly more than the type 0, but here also free diced cartilage is sufficient. Here there is a minor deficiency, but along with that there is also columellar retraction. As you can see in this patient, there's a slight columellar retraction along with a supratip depression. So here there is just weakening of the septal support. There is no deficiency as such in the dorsal septum. Here, a free diced cartilage with columellar strut usually suffices. So this is how we make the free diced cartilage. This cartilage can be obtained from the septal cartilage itself, or from the tragal cartilage or the conchal cartilage. Usually for such minor concealments, the septal cartilage is enough. These cartilages are cut into fine pieces of 1 millimeter cartilage, and using this dermator or skin grafting blade, one can cut fine pieces, as you can see in this video, and then they are loaded into a 1 ml syringe or an insulin syringe or a tuberculin syringe. Usually what we do is we make small holes in this insulin syringe, and so that the excess water can be expressed out. And this syringe is ultimately used to insert this free diced cartilage in the areas of minor depressions. Now the next type is type 2, which is the moderate type of saddle nose. Here, a cartilage vault restoration is mandatory. So as you can see in this patient, the cartilaginous portion, the middle third of this patient's nose has some kind of a deficiency. The septal support is lacking here. There is also a columellar retraction and the tip has drooped down, or there is a loss of tip support. Here you can see there's also some kind of a alar weakening on the left side. Now in these patients, if there is a base bony width is, if it is a broad base bony width, one has to perform osteotomies to narrow it, or if there is any deviation, one has to perform osteotomies and bring it to the midline. In these patients, what usually suffices an extended spreader graft or a proud spreader graft, which is extending slightly higher than the septal framework, and an extended septal extension graft or a columellar strut to support the tip. So usually these grafts can be articulated from the septum, or rarely, in case where you don't get a sufficient straight septal cartilage, maybe a costal cartilage will be of great help. So in this patient, I had used extended spreader grafts with a septal extension graft, and I could give a good dorsal augmentation with good support to the tip. Similarly, in this case, this patient also had a middle third vault splaying, leading to a supratip depression, and here also extended spreader grafts with free disc cartilage to camouflage the dorsal irregularities was done. Coming to the next type of saddle nose, that is the type 3, where the saddling is a little bit more. This is similar to type 2 if you see the deformity. But here, when you open the nose, what you find is the remnant septal cartilage, where you probably would fix your extended spreader grafts or spreader grafts. That remnant septal cartilage is deficient. So here, the septal framework is lacking. Now, for such cases, if you see in this lady, she has a very broad nose with no dorsal aesthetic lines at all. Here, if you see her bones have also are little bit depressed, not much, but the cartilage here is totally splayed and depressed. And also there is lack of support to the tip. Now, in such cases, what you need is a very strong septal framework. So you need to create a L-shaped septal replacement graft or an L-shaped strut, which is anchored to the nasal bone superiorly and inferiorly to the anterior nasal spine, preferably by a non-absorbable suture. Over this, once the dorsal height is defined by this L-shaped strut, one can put contour grafts like probably fascia rectus fascia. If you are harvesting the costal cartilage from the same site, one can harvest a rectus fascia and use it as a camouflage graft, or free disc cartilage to camouflage the irregularities of the dorsum can be used. So in this case, I had harvested the costal cartilage and created an L-shaped strut along with the septal extension, an interdigitated septal extension graft with extended spreaders. That is how the L strut was made, and it was fixed to the anterior nasal spine and to the nasal bones. And over this, I had put free disc cartilage. Now coming to the much more severe grade, which is the type 4. Here, structural reconstruction is again mandatory. In this young boy, he had a history of septal abscess in childhood, and which resulted in progressive saddling of the nose. As you can see, he has wide nasal bones. His base bony width is quite wide, and he has lack of dorsal aesthetic lines. If you see on the base, the alar also flared, and the alar base is absolutely broad, and the tip is very tip has absolutely no support. In such cases, again, a total septal replacement graft, a total septal reconstruction with extended spreader grafts with interdigitated columellar strut or an extended septal extension graft, along with, now this will not give the sufficient dorsal height. That's why along with this, one has to probably add a solid contoured onlay graft or stacks of, like Dr. Kshitij Patil sir had mentioned yesterday, one can make strips of the costal cartilage and let them warp for half an hour, and after that stack them above each other, make a bundle and put it as an onlay graft. And on top of this, DCF can also be used, but DCF cannot be relied for augmentation of more than 2 to 3 millimeters. So in this case, I used a solid graft along with a DCF, Diced cartilage with fascia, just to contour the solid graft. Now type 5 is the catastrophic type, the one that requires a multidisciplinary approach, probably help of your plastic surgeon friends. Now these kind of cases, we have the limitation of the skin and the subcutaneous tissue around the nose. There is severe skin scarring, and one has to reconstruct not only the skin but the internal lining of the bony and the cartilaginous wall as well. Here, the tissues adjacent to the nose are affected, so we need to take help of probably a forehead flap or a nasolabial flap for lining or skin coverage. Now coming to the choice of graft material, initially there were many graft materials that were being used, like the iliac crest, the Gore-Tex, silicone, lot of things. But now what our practice is, we are mainly sticking to the alloplastic grafts like septal cartilage, conchyl cartilage, and the costal cartilage. So these are the various options that are available with us. In most of the minor augmentation cases, the septal cartilage is enough. Maybe tracheal cartilage if some minor concealing grafts are required. The conchyl cartilage can also be used for augmentation, costal cartilage in cases of grade 3, 4, and 5, and temporalis fascia, rectus fascia, or tensor fascia lata for obtaining the fascia for DCF grafts can be used. Now, yesterday there were many questions regarding the costal cartilage. So this is one graph that I'll be elaborating on how to harvest the costal cartilage, because one being ENT surgeons, this is an unknown area for us. So one has to be well versed with the anatomy around here, and we have been regularly harvesting costal cartilage, and till now, fortunately I have not encountered pneumothorax. So one is very scared. One must be scared, but if you know good anatomical landmarks out here, it is very rare to puncture the pleura. So I'll just roughly tell the surface marking here. So everybody knows that the angle of Louis, or the sternal angle, corresponds to the second costal cartilage. If you go down below and come to the subcostal angle, the subcostal angle here roughly corresponds to the seventh costal cartilage. Now, if you palpate the costal margin from the subcostal angle down, it is formed by the 7th to 10th costal cartilages. So by counting the intercostal spaces, one can easily palpate. In thin build patients, it's very easy to palpate. So what we harvest are mainly the 9th and 10th, 8th, 9th and 10th costal cartilages. In some cases where you require the DCF or probably fascia for camouflaging, one can also harvest the rectus fascia from the same incision and use it for wrapping the free diced cartilage. The rectus fascia is usually a longitudinal fascia running in the midline. It is formed by the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle. We usually harvest the anterior layer of it. Now coming to the relationship of the pleura and the costal cartilage. So if you see in this diagram, what we harvest are the 8th, 9th and 10th costal cartilages. You can see clearly in this diagram that the pleura anteriorly ends at the level of roughly at the anteriorly at the level of 5th or 6th costal cartilage. So down below here, we are unlikely to encounter the pleura. Now we know that along the inferior margin of the costal cartilages runs the neurovascular bundle. One must strictly stay in the subpericondial plane to avoid injury to these vessels. The site of incision, usually in females, we prefer to take it on the left side, on the right side, sorry, so that when they drape the sari, it gets hidden there. But it is absolutely the surgeon's choice, where if there are two teams employed for the surgery, maybe the other team can start on the other side. We usually prefer to take the incision right over the eighth or ninth costal cartilage, and it and we should also place it a little medially so that we can also harvest the rectus fascia. Usually a 4 into 4 centimeter rectus fascia is sufficient to create the facial sleeve or the facial bag. After taking the incision, one encounters the external oblique muscle. The external oblique muscle has to be divided to expose the rib. Once the rib is exposed, one encounters the perichondrium, which can be split in an H-shaped technique. So this is how the rib is being exposed. The external oblique muscle has been cut. And this is the rib that is seen. The costal cartilage is being seen. The more you dissect, the more mobility you have over the costal cartilage. So after the rib is being exposed, the perichondrium is incised in an H-shaped, sorry. The perichondrium has to be excised and the flaps to be raised. One should go under the rib in a purely subperichondrial plane, so to avoid injury to the neurovascular bundle. The perichondrium is elevated completely, and one can also harvest this strip of perichondrium to use as a camouflaging graft, and subperichondrial dissection has to be done. This instrument that you can see comes into, this is an elevator, a special rib elevator, a curved rib elevator, which helps getting under the rib to dissect it completely and prevent injury to the underlying structures. The cartilaginous rib is cut medially and laterally by a partial thickness incision along perpendicular to the long axis of the rib. It can be freed using any elevator like the Freer's elevator by gentle side-to-side movement, and it is released medially and laterally. Usually, the length of the graft usually depends on the length of the septal extension graft or the L strut that you require, and accordingly one must harvest. And it is always better to harvest a little extra so that you can also make the other grafts like columella struts and the alar rim grafts using the same cartilage. The wound should be closed in two layers using a Weichel suture and absorbable suture. One must be sure to reapproximate the perichondrium and the muscle fascia tightly to avoid any chest wall deformities. A catheter can be placed inside the subperichondrial space to instill a long-acting anesthetic, probably like bupivacaine, for the post-op pain, to reduce the post-op pain. And a compression dressing has to be applied for 3 days. A drain, we don't usually put a drain, but it can be put. For post-op pain management, usually the first week patients have a lot of pain. But if you put the lumbar drain or a small catheter inside to instill the anesthetic agent for probably 24 hours, it has shown to significantly reduce the post-op pain in such patients. And while harvesting, one must be very careful not to injure the inferior line of the neurovascular bundle, not to handle the muscle too much, and preserve the inner lamella of the rib. If we do so, the post-op pain is significantly less. And usually we ask the patient to be mobilized the next day itself, because restriction of activity again will cause the patient to recover very slow. What are the complications of rib harvest? Hypertrophic scar. I have probably during my training days, I have harvested the maximum number of ribs, and I've hardly encountered about 1 or 2 cases of keloid formation in almost 2 years. Infection and resorption are also very rare. After harvesting the graft, if it is put in the antibiotic solution, for example, gentamicin for some time, infection can be significantly reduced, and post-op antibiotics should definitely be given in Indian setups for at least what I usually give is 7 days of antibiotics post-op, especially if I'm using a costal cartilage. Seroma formation, I have encountered one patient with seroma formation. Um, we should just drain the seroma and do a dry dressing, and usually it resolves without any serious complications. And chest wall deformities, I have not encountered so far. Pneumothorax, it is once you have a good idea of the anatomy in this area, pneumothorax is unlikely to occur. Even if it occurs, um, uh, what is advocated is a red rubber catheter is to be placed in the chest cavity through the wound, and suction has to be applied to remove the free air. Positive pressure has the anesthetist to give positive pressure to fully expand the lung. Then the red rubber catheter is clamped and left in place. A purse string suture is placed around the edges of this defect now. While the positive pressure is being applied by the anesthetist, the red rubber catheter is to be withdrawn and the purse string suture has to be tightened. So this can manage the iatrogenic pneumothorax, and a post-operative chest X-ray should be done to monitor the progress of the patient. Now, while you use costal cartilage, one must be very well versed with the theory of elastic forces of the cartilage. So to prevent warping, what we do is we use the core part of this cartilage. So the periphery of the costal cartilage usually has these elastic forces which lead to warping. But if you use the core piece, the middle piece, which is slightly yellow in color, I don't think I have a picture of that. So you will be able to definitely identify a change in color. The core is usually a little yellowish as compared to periphery, which is white. And the core piece is to be used to make all the grafts. It can be sliced and kept into a saline solution or an antibiotic solution and see for warping. If in case it warps, one can use the opposing edges as Kshitij told yesterday, and they can be sandwiched to form a straight graft and then can be used. Sometimes the problem that we encounter, especially in elderly patients or patients who smoke, is the problem of an ossified rib, and that is when you get really handicapped because you don't have material to use in augmentation rhinoplasty, and uh, in these cases it's just bad luck. So mainly it is a concern in older patients. In mostly it starts at the osteocartilaginous junction, and there are small foci of calcification along the costal cartilage. While contouring grafts out of this, they may act as site of weaknesses, and the grafts can break. One can use the drill in such cases to contour or articulate these grafts. And in case you have a strong suspicion the patient is elderly smoker, you can ask for an X-ray or probably a limited CT with axial cuts at the sternum and costochondral junction to have an idea of what is going to happen. So that would be it about dorsal augmentation. And I'm thankful to Kshitij Patil sir, Dr. Sri Harsha, and my teachers, of course, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any questions?
Take the questions at the end of the lecture.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was a very nice and it was a very nice lecture by Hina.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, nice and informative. So she's covered almost all the aspects of dorsal augmentation. Now I'm going. So now let's go to another aspect of aesthetic rhinoplasty, and that is tip surgery. And I'll just share my screen. Okay, so I'll just share my screen right now. Okay, so you're getting my screen right now?
Yes, sir, we are getting, sir. You can start.
Okay. Okay, so we do get a lot of patients coming to our OPD with something in their mind, mostly coming for aesthetic improvement. So it's you that who have to decide what is needed for the patient. In my first and second lecture, we generally discussed about the functional surgeries, and this third lecture is about cosmetic improvement in the shape of the nose. So it is said that he who masters the tip surgery masters rhinoplasty, and that's why generally tip should be done at the last after doing the dorsum. It is also said that we all know the very common dictum that is used: as goes the nose, so goes as goes the septum, so goes the nose. There's one more dictum in the modern rhinoplasty: as goes the tip, so goes the result of the rhinoplasty surgery. So especially for those who are getting into rhinoplasty surgery, this is the most difficult part, that you have to understand it completely, and then you have to master these techniques slowly. So this surgery is definitely not an easy surgery, and this is mostly because of the wrong analysis, the variable skin thickness, and the limited soft tissue covering. I use this picture in most of my presentations. This is by Dean Toriomi, and you must know the ideal nose sip aesthetics before getting into the aesthetic surgery of the nose. So the nose should always be triangular in the basal view, and the dorsum should be high enough to cast shadows on both the sides, and the columella show of about 1 or 2 millimeters. The dorsal aesthetic lines should be brow to tip dorsal aesthetic lines. Generally, they are straight in males, but in females, they can be curved a little bit with a very subtle curve, and the shape of the columella should be a gull wing shape. Gull is a bird in a flight shape, kind of a shape of the columella on the front view. We must also get our definitions correct. So this is the running point of the nose. The running point of the nose generally starts from the upper eyelid crease. So this is the upper eyelid crease, and this point corresponding, this point of the dorsum corresponding to this upper eyelid crease is the running point of the nose, and here is the point where your nose should start from. Your planning should consist of a line that is drawn from this point to the ideal tip, and whatever is there below this line, you have to augment it. Whatever is there above this line, you may have to reduce it. Now coming to the definitions of the tip, this is the tip lobule. This is the supratip lobule, and this is the infratip lobule. The lobule above the tip is the supratip lobule, and the lobule below the tip is the infratip lobule area. Of course, we know all of us know about the columella and the ala and the ala rim, and this is the place of a ala rim crease. We also, all of us know about the anatomy of the lower lateral cartilages, but I think I should revise it once more, that the lower lateral cartilage consists of 3 parts, consisting of the medial crus, the lateral crus, and the point in between is the intermediate crus. So this is the lateral crus, this is the medial crus, and this is the intermediate crus. So you must know about this. You also must be clear about the definitions, various definitions about and terminologies about the nasal length, nasal projection and nasal rotation. So the projection is how much your nose sticks out of your face. Rotation is, you must know that the nasolabial angle is generally about 90 to 95 degree in males and 95 to 105 degree in females. So if the tip is more obtuse, if the nasolabial angle is more obtuse, if the nose is upturned, so upward rotated, or if it is downward rotated. Generally, upward rotation is called as rotation and downward rotation is called as a derotation. So these are the terminologies that you must know. And in females, then the tip is generally set off from the dorsum just a little above it, and this subtle break is called as a supratip break point, generally significant for females, and it's a beauty spot. So we must all know about this. So here, this represents the nasal length and this represents the projection. So the projection is generally over half of the nasal length. So this is tip lobule and infratip lobule. Also, in your analysis, you must draw these two parallel lines from your medial canthus. If you draw a line parallel to passing through the medial canthus, if the ala base is away from these, is out of these lines, then the ala base is wide, and you may have to correct it by certain maneuvers. If the base bony width is also wider than this, then you have to do an osteotomy to correct this. So you must analyze this thing as well. And you also must be familiar with the Anderson's tip tripod concept. He has compared a nasal tip with a tripod in which these two lateral crusts act as the two lateral crusts on the two opposite side act as two legs, and the two medial crusts together act as one leg. So by shortening and lengthening these three arms or these three legs of the tripod, you can control the projection and the rotation of the tip. You can control the projection and rotation of the tip. So based upon this concept, an extension of this concept is a M-arched model by Peter Adamson. You must also be familiar with the different shapes of the nasal tip. The nasal tip can be a bulbous nasal tip. It can be, if it is squarish in shape in the basal view, it is a boxy tip, or if it is an over projected, it can be a sharp tip. In lateral view, the nose can have an over projected tip. It can have a bulbous tip, or it can be a under projected tip. The tip can be droopy if the dorsum is above the tip, or it can be called as a droopy tip. This is also called as a tension nose. Other deformities like short nose, pug nose deformity, or a Pinocchio nose deformity, these should also be known. You must also study the columella and the type of ala. So for that, actually on your patient's photograph, you have to draw a line passing. You have to draw a line like this. This line B. So if this is more than 1 millimeter, then it is a hanging columella. If the part which is above this line is more, then it is due to ala retraction, or there can be a combination of both these things. Coming to the ala, there can be a hanging ala, there can be a columella retraction. If you can see here, the columella retraction or a hidden columella, and there can be a combination of both these things. So that makes your columella even more hidden. In India, as we all know, we have regional variations and climatic variations, and because of that, we have different shapes of the nose in different regions of different parts. So as we all know, the North Indian noses are long noses as compared to the Central India and the Southern India and Western Indians, and of course the Northeast noses, they have are also different, but always they have heroes in all the regions, and the general population in the region generally wants to become like their heroes. So definitely there's a lot of variation, but you have to achieve the same goal that can be achieved. So as you can see, North Indian noses are long noses, while South Indian with thin skin, while South Indian noses generally have thick skin and a shorter length of the nose. So these can be compared to Caucasian type of noses, and the South Indian noses can be compared to non-Caucasian type of noses for a general broad classification. So what is the difference between these two? The Caucasian or the North Indian noses are long noses. They have firm cartilages, strong cartilages, they have thin skin, and the underlying subcutaneous tissue is very less. So generally tip sutures, modification by means of tip sutures generally work in cases of North Indian noses or Caucasian type of noses, while the Central India, Western India, and the Southern India, they generally have thick skin, low dorsum, and on opening up, they have weak cartilages, weak septum, weak upper lateral cartilages, weak lower lateral cartilages, and also the subcutaneous tissue is also very much. So you have to reduce the subcutaneous tissue as well. So to give a good tip definition and the dorsal definition, you have to use a lot of grafts to portray the changes, as opposed to the North Indian or the Caucasian type of noses. Generally, you have to do reduction, and whatever tip sutures that are used are generally very well seen. Another thing is, there's another concept of a bitip and a monotip. Bitip is generally, if you take a photograph, you generally see two light reflexes on the tip, as opposed to monotip, where when you take a photograph, you can see only one light reflex. But believe me, both of them can be beautiful in their own ways. So Hina has spoken about this. So typically, let's talk about tip sutures first. So for Caucasian type of noses, there is a particular protocol in which you can fix by means of tip sutures. So the first step is the reducing the excess of the lateral crura, that is excision of in the supratip in the excision of the lateral crus, cephalic part. So this is called as cephalic trimming. Then comes the domal creation suture or a transdomal suture. Then comes the columella, fixing of the columella strut. Then comes the domal equalization suture and an interdomal suture. So let's see all the sutures one by one. So when we, at the end of these sutures, you should get a tipped diamond. So this is a very peculiar tipped diamond. As you can see here, these by means of tip sutures only. So this upper part, these are the two tip defining points, as you can see here, which corresponds to the philtrum, and also this upper part corresponds to the supratip break point, and this lower part of this tip diamond corresponds to the columella break point. So let's see all these things one by one. So this is cephalic trimming. As if you measure this lateral crus measures up to 10 millimeters. So we, in this case, we mark about and retain about 7 to 8 millimeters of the lateral crus and resect the rest. Now, why do we do this? We generally do this in thicker cartilages to reduce the bulbosity in the supratip area. So this is a cephalic trimming. This reduces the bulbosity in the supratip area, and also you must remember whenever you're doing this, it causes a little bit, some amount of upward rotation, some amount of rotation. Okay, so you have to retain about 7 to 8 millimeters minimum at the farthest point, and at an intermediate crus area you have to retain minimum 5 millimeters. Now if the cartilages are weak, then you may create a deformity or weakness over there or at the lateral nasal wall area. So to prevent this, sometimes, and also to achieve the same goal of reducing the supratip width, you may infold it. You may infold the lateral crus. So for this, you have to undermine the vestibular skin, and then you have to take a partial thickness cut and fold it inside. So this is lateral crural underlay technique, which was popularized by Gruber. So this is a lateral crural underlay technique. So by doing this and suturing this at 2 points, you are actually strengthening the lateral wall, and at the same time you are also achieving the reduction in the bulbosity in the supratip area. So this is lateral crural underlay technique, or folding of the lateral crus. It is done on the both the sides. Now comes the third point, is a columella strut. Now the columella strut should be a strong cartilage measuring of the maximum length. It is supposed to support the medial crus, and it should, the columella strut can be a free floating columella strut, or it can be a structural graft. So if you just want to retain the shape of the nose, you can use a free floating columella strut at the level in between the two medial crus. But if you want it for increasing the projection of the tip, then it must go till the level of the nasal spine, just in front of the nasal spine, but just short of it, because if it touches the nasal spine or premaxilla, then there may be a clicking sound on moving. Also, you can advance the medial crus on the this columella strut should be a strong cartilage, and it should be a long cartilage, about 3 centimeters or so. Coming to transdermal sutures. So transdermal suture, you have to see where you want your tip to be. So you mark the tip defining points, and then you have to hold it with the forceps. You pass a needle, and you have to take a suture passing through the cephalic part of it, passing through the upper part. You have to be careful so that this this suture should not be tied too tightly, otherwise it can cause some amount of pinching. Then comes the interdermal suture. Interdermal suture, or rather this is a dermal equalization suture which I am taking here. So now that you have taken two separate sutures as a tardy suture or transdermal suture, now you have to equalize and get it to the same point. So this is a dermal equalization suture. Then comes the lateral crural spanning suture. Sometimes these lateral crus may be wide apart, and you may have to bring it a little together. So in such situations, you may just pass a needle passing through the widest point, and then you may take a suture. But you have to, this is a very dangerous suture. It should be tied very lightly only till the point that the lateral crus comes a little bit together. If you over tighten this, it can cause retraction of the columella over here. Now coming to a few examples, few cases. This beautiful girl comes with a hump nose, also wants an improvement in the shape of the nose along with the breathing difficulty. So as you can see here, these are the philtrum, these are the 2 points of the philtrum, and you can see here a very wide tip she has. In addition, if you draw a line through this, now the portion below this line is more. So she is having a hanging columella, and as you can see here on the frontal view, this is a hanging columella. It is not a seagull in the flight kind of a view. Now on opening up, this girl had huge alar cartilages, more than 10 millimeters. As you can see here, no tip defining points. So we reduced the cartilages by lateral crural underlay and the tip sutures. And here she was after the surgery. Good dorsal aesthetic lines. I could, by tongue and groove technique, I could give her a good columella, which is columella setback. But you see, after 7 years, this has come back. Although the columella has come back to its original level, and this is probably because of using absorbable sutures. So at points when you are using really firm sutures, you must use permanent sutures like 50 ethylon or 50 nylon. So as you can see here, we nicely treated her hanging columella, but after 7 years, she still has a little bit of a hanging. So this is probably because of absorbable sutures. So for strong sutures where tension point is more, we generally nowadays going for permanent sutures. And this is the importance that you should have all the records. You should take photographs whenever the patient reports to your OPD for whatever reason. And this only gives you an insight that your techniques are working or your techniques are not working. Here are the other few examples. As you can see here, a very broad tip, only tip sutures and a dorsal augmentation a little bit. Now this beautiful girl, she came for aesthetic improvement of the shape of the nose. Now on the dorsal view, as you can see here, as far as the tip is concerned, she is having a hanging columella, broad tip. On the lateral view, if you draw a line like this, this is the hanging columella, and this is a very typical boxy tip. This is a boxy tip deformity. So in such cases, you have to use a tongue in groove technique. Now there was a lot of question about what is tongue in groove technique. Now tongue in groove, the classical tongue in groove technique is a tongue in groove setback. Tongue in groove setback. In tongue in groove setback, you have to anchor these to medial crus and pull it back. You have to pull the medial crus and anchor it to the caudal septum. But in this situation, whenever you want to use tongue and groove technique, you have to make sure that the caudal septum is absolutely in the center. It is absolutely fixed well on the top of the anterior nasal spine, and only then you can use a tongue and groove technique. If the caudal septum is deviated, it will deflect the entire tip assembly to one side. You must be sure that the caudal septum is absolutely in the center. So in tongue and groove technique, you have to set back. I'll just play this video again for you. As you can see here, the medial crus is set back and it is fixed to the caudal septum. So now this is setback of the lateral crus to treat the hanging columella. So this was the tongue in groove technique. So in front view, as you can see here, we could nicely control the tip width, also the hanging columella. Now this is a nice gull wing in shape, a gull wing in flight shape. We could nicely treat the hanging and the boxy tip, which I had is also gone. And this gentleman comes with breathing difficulty, hump nose, and crooked nose deformity, a little bit of crooked nose. He also was an aspiring model, so he wanted a good improvement in the shape of the nose. So as you can see here on the front view, he had a mild deviation to the left side, a broad tip, and a hanging columella. On the lateral view, you can see a good amount of hump. Now, if you draw a line through this, you can see there is a hanging columella, and you can also see there is a columellar retraction. So this is a columellar retraction. And so this is a combination of hanging columella and columellar retraction. We treated by using tongue and groove technique. As you can see here, a good dorsal aesthetic lines, we could nicely control the tip width, and the hanging columella is also taken care of. And as you can see here, we could take care of the hanging columella and also to some extent the retraction of the ala. Other similar cases, hanging columella. Now coming to tip rotation. Now by definition, the tip rotation means upward rotation. Okay, so how do we have to achieve this? This can be achieved by various means, by various ways. The caudals, you can achieve it by caudal septal resection. You can achieve it by a tongue in groove technique, or you can also, in minimal cases, you can also use a tip suspension suture in some cases. Now coming to the Anderson's tip tripod in a little bit of details. Now these are the two upper lateral cartilages. As you, this is the tip tripod. These are the two upper lateral cartilages, combination of two medial crusts. Okay, these are the two lateral crusts, and this is the medial crust. Now if you want to upward rotate the nose, you have to shorten this, you have to pull this. If you have to upward rotate, and you have to elevate this. Okay, so if you have to upward rotate the nose, you have to shorten the lateral crust by means of some technique, and you have to elevate the medial crust. Okay, similarly, to derotate, you have to lengthen the lateral crust, and you have to shorten the medial crust. So this is the concept of Anderson tip tripod. Now coming to a few examples. Now this gentleman with a little bit of a hump and a pseudo hump, breathing difficulty, but on lateral view, as you can see here, the nasolabial angle is acute, and on front view, his nose is, because of the acute nasolabial angle, his tip is coming towards his lips. So but this is very minimal. So in such cases, you may use a tip rotation suture or a suture called as tip suspension suture. But for this, you must put a columella strut. Now, how do we do this? This tip suspension suture, you pass a needle, 24 gauge needle, through the columella break point after putting a columella strut, and then you feed a permanent suture 50 ethylon, and you take it from the other side. Then it is passed through the anterior septal angle, and this needle is again passed through the opposite side. And as you can see here, the tip going up, you can see here the tip going up. So this is a tip suspension suture which actually pulls the tip assembly upwards. So, but this should be reserved for minor degree of tip correction. As you can see here, this tip was coming to in front to the level of the lips. Now this is a nice gull wing in shape, gull wing in flight shape, and this is a 90 degree, a nice 90 degree from this acute angle. Other few examples. Acute nasolabial angle, nice 95 to 100 degree. Now, at times you also get over projected noses. Now this girl, she thought her nose is a little bit over projected. She thought her tip is sticking out too much out of her face, and that's what she came out with. Also, she was complaining a little bit of a bifid tip and a little bit of a broad tip. So What to do in such cases? In such cases also you have to uh, decrease the projection. To decrease the projection is not so easy. You'll have to do certain maneuvers, like you'll have to shorten the lateral crus. That will give her some amount of upward rotation as well. And in addition to that, you may have to do you have to shorten the medial crus as well. So this is lateral crural sliding technique, in which you shorten the lateral crus. This is the lateral crus. You cut it in middle and slide it over each other, and that's how you shorten this. Let's see a short video about this. For such a thing, you may have to undermine the skin, undermine the vestibular skin of the lateral crus. So after undermining the skin, okay, so I have undermined the skin over here, as you can see here. Then you mark the point of maximum convexity, and you split this lateral crus at the most dependent area, and as you can see here, and then you slide it on the top of each other, fix it, and it is sutured with 2 sutures. So here she was, the bifidity is gone. We could control the tip width, we could decrease the tip width, we could give a good dorsal aesthetic lines, and we could even decrease the tip width to some extent. Large nostrils and over-projected nose. Now this gentleman came with a complaint that he has a far bigger nose and he wants a smaller nose, and also the shape and size of his nostril is too much, in addition to the breathing difficulty that he was having. On opening up, he was having huge alar cartilages, which was used by cephalic trimming and tip sutures. As you can see here, he landed up with a over projected nose. A little bit of dorsal reduction was done and he landed up with an over projected nose. So we decreased the length of the lateral crus by means of lateral crural sliding, and it was then we took the tip defining sutures. Here we could correct his the crooked nose deformity. We could nicely control the tip width, hanging columella, and also the shape of the nostrils, as you can see here. So this is the deprojection. So you can see large nostrils and a highly projected nose. We could get to this level about 3 to 4 millimeters. The large nostrils are also gone, and the boxy and bulbous tip is also gone. Now you also encounter a lot of isolated tip deformities like these. So in her case, only one lateral crus, as you can see here, the deformity is more on the left hand side. So on left hand side, the lateral crus was very large as compared to left hand side, and this is very rarely seen. So even to equalize, sometimes you may have to do the same technique of lateral crural sliding. You may have to shorten this, and we could get to we could control her tip width from 2 centimeters to 8 millimeters. Okay. In addition to that, she also has a pseudo hump. Now, believe me, this is not a hump. I have done no dorsal augmentation, no hump reduction for this patient. I have just given her a good projection. So this is a downward rotation of the tip. I have given her a good tip projection, and I have filled this radix depression with free dice cartilage so that we could get to this result. Now, pinch nostrils and collapse of the external nasal valve. Coming to this, another deformity in which you can see the patient was having a droopy tip, crooked nose, breathing difficulty, and in addition to that, on deep inspiration, the patient was having collapse of the lateral nasal wall. So as you can see here, on the right hand side, it looks all right, but there is a very prominent notching on the left hand side, and this is giving rise to the weakness of the lateral wall. Now you can see here, this lateral crus over here is directed towards the lateral canthus, and as opposed to that, the lateral crus over here is directed towards the medial canthus. So this is a malpositioning. So you have to correct this malpositioning. So you have to correct it by means of a firm graft. So these grafts are called as lateral crural strut grafts. So in such situation, you may have to either completely detach the lateral crus, or you may even insert it without detaching it. In this case, we had not released the lateral crus from its original position, but we placed a graft passing from this to the pyriform aperture, and you see the crooked nose is gone, the tip width is nicely controlled, good dorsal aesthetic lines, and you see this weakness over here is completely corrected, and the nasolabial angle is also 90 degree as opposed to an acute and nasolabial angle. And in post-op, on deep inspiration, there is no collapse. Even on deep inspiration, there is no collapse. Now, interesting cases sometimes we get from all over the country. This gentleman was refused surgery by many surgeons all over India, and he was asked to visit me. He told me that I cannot sleep without this, and I asked him where he got it from. He got it from Amazon, and this is what he said. This is what is happening, and can you correct this? So we definitely accepted the case. So now this is because of the weak lateral crus and also the malorientation of the lateral crus. The lateral crus should always be directed towards the lateral canthus, but if it is directed towards the medial canthus, it makes a weak point on the lateral nasal wall. So on deep inspiration, it causes the weakness of the lateral nasal wall. So in such cases, you have to release the lateral crus from its attachment and underlying vestibular skin. You have to strengthen it with the help of cartilages that is called as a lateral crural strut graft, and those are inserted in caudally positioned pocket, below caudally positioned pocket, directed towards the lateral canthus. So on opening up, this gentleman had papery thin lateral crus, and so we released it from its original position. We attached grafts called as lateral crural strut graft, and those were inserted in a caudally positioned pocket directed towards the lateral canthus. So this was the pre-op. Okay, and even on deep inspiration, now this gentleman was fine. Sometimes you may have to do a caudal septal resection. So this is just a small video of caudal septal resection. Depending upon each and every case, you may resect about 2 to 4 millimeters. Now, okay, coming to this gentleman, he had a Pinocchio nose, a very large nose, and he also had a breathing difficulty. He was teased in his village, so he came to us and we accepted him for the surgery. So we had to do, even a tongue in groove technique was not sufficient for this. So we had to do resection of the caudal septum. We had to do hump reduction. We had to reduce his nose from all the angles. We had to do the dorsal reduction. We had to do caudal reduction. Then we had to you can see from here we got it to this point. So we had to reduce the caudal septum, and then we had to use a tongue in groove technique. Now, in addition to that, we had to do lateral crural shortening of the lateral crus by means of lateral crural sliding. bilaterally and also shortening of the medial crust by doing medial crural underlay. So here he was, nose which was treated very well. Now deformities of lateral crust. At times, the lateral crust can be concave or convex, that may give rise to prominent nasal crease over here. So here is a gentleman who came in old age of his life, but that is because of weakening of the cartilaginous and the ligamental forces, that he started having a breathing difficulty and the collapse of the lateral nasal wall on deep inspiration. On opening up, as you can see here, his left lateral crust was very badly deformed and concave. So we use this technique of lateral crural flip rotation technique. So the lateral crust was undermined from the skin. It was released from its original position, and then it was flip rotated and sutured in the same place. So here he was. We did not do any osteotomy for this patient. We could also control the tip rotation very well. Now, certain deformities like upturned noses or short noses or a pug nose deformity. So this is called as a pug nose deformity, in which you can see the nostrils of the person on the front view, and this person was having a broad tip. But you see on lateral view, he does not need any dorsal augmentation. So this is an isolated tip deformity. So this was treated by extended spreader graft. Now what is extended spreader graft? We already spoke about yesterday. The spreader grafts, when extend beyond the anterior septal angle to support either the columella strut or the caudal septal extension graft, that is called as extended spreader graft. So in this case, extended spreader graft with the columella strut was used to derotate the nose. To derotate means to downward rotate the nose. So upward rotation can be a little easier, but believe me, downward rotation is definitely not easy. So we had to use lateral crural, we had to use extended spreader grafts here in addition to the septal extension graft I've used in this case over here. So by means of this, you have actually increased the length of the septum, and then the lateral cartilages are advanced on the top of this assembly. So here he was. We could nicely control his rotation. As you can see here, no dorsal augmentation was done, but we could derotate the nose from here to here. So that was all thanks to the septal extension graft and the extended spreader graft. So this was all about tip sutures, and I'll just go on to another presentation. Okay, so this is generally about the tip graft or tip grafts. Now, are you able to get this?
Not yet.
Not?
Not yet.
Okay, just a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get that. So now we spoke about the tip sutures. Now we are coming to the tip grafts. So coming to tip grafts. So here I'm using Katrina, not because she has a beautiful nose, but the overcoat she's wearing hides all the curvature of a body, and the thick skin behaves in a similar way. So whenever you have to deal with a thick skin, you have to augment to reveal the changes and to reveal the things that you have done to the nose. So for thick skin, even in addition to taking all these sutures, generally these sutures don't work very well in thick skin. The tip sutures generally work very well in Caucasian noses with thin skin and thick cartilages. But in thick skin, the cartilages are generally thin. And whenever you take the tip sutures, generally tip sutures alone don't suffice. And you have to use grafts, tip grafts. So tip grafts can be of various types. They can be cap graft or a Peyk-Onlay graft. Cap graft is a cartilage augmentation and a projection graft. It can be a tip shield graft. It can be a supratip lobule graft, or it can be an infratip lobule graft. It can be a lateral crural onlay graft. It can be a rim graft and lateral crural stud graft. We'll see all these grafts one by one. So generally we can divide tip grafts into infratip lobule grafts and supratip lobule grafts. So coming to cap graft is a cartilage augmentation and projection graft. So after taking tip sutures and a columella strut, now this is, as you can see here, I'm taking multi-layered multi-layered cap graft or a Peyk-Onlay graft. So it's better to fix it with a needle first, and then you can fix it on in the tip. Now cap graft is generally placed as a supratip lobule graft. So whenever you want a projection in a supratip area, you should put a cap graft. And the cap graft can be, all this graft can be in multiple layers. Coming to a shield graft is an infratip lobule graft. So if you want a projection in an infratip lobule area, this is called as a shield graft. You can also use shield graft in multiple layers. Now, shield graft can be
Sir, can you able to hear us?
extremely sorry, there was some disturbance from the internet side. Okay, so we were on the extended shield graft. So if the shield graft extends above the tip more than 3 millimeters, then it has a tendency to roll back. And to prevent this, you may use a back stop graft, that is a cap graft. Okay, so whenever you are using an extended shield graft more than 3 millimeters, it's better to use a backstop graft, that is a shield graft. And also there is some amount of deformity that is created over here, that this deformity will give you a seagull deformity. So it's better to put a graft over here also. So by means of a lateral crural onlay grafts. Okay. So, or sometimes lateral crural onlay graft can also be used if you see any deformity, then you can just put a cartilage or piece of cartilage over there. And the advantage of open approach is that you can suture this cartilage in that place where you want it to be. So this is the lateral crural onlay graft. Now, if sometimes you can see your tip lobule is isolated, looks isolated from the alar lobule, and this margin or the border does not look straight. So in such cases, you can put alar rim grafts. So for putting an alar rim graft, you can create a pocket in the alar rim and you put this graft measuring 1 millimeters by 1.5 centimeters, and sometimes you may cut edges of the graft so that it does not rock with the tip. So this is alar rim graft. So these were the different grafts that we studied. Now looking at the cases, this is a girl wanted an improvement in the shape of the nose. She has a broad tip, very thick skin. So tip sutures were not going to suffice. So we use septal extension graft. So this is how she was. The columellar retraction over here, as you can see here, is also corrected. A broad tip, thick skin. We did a dorsal augmentation, and we could control we could control the width of the tip, and the projection was given by tip grafts. So these are few more cases. Now, these are very rare cases in which there is isolated tip hypoplasia. So these are the cases in which, as you can see here, the dorsum is all right. The dorsum is all right, but the only tip looks either a chipped off kind of a tip or pressed against the glass appearance. So on opening up, her medial crust, her intermediate, this was only the deformity of medial and intermediate crust, and the lateral crust seems to be all right. So we had to lengthen the medial crust and the lateral crust to give to take it to the intermediate crust, and we also had to use multi-layered shield graft and multi-layered cap graft to get to this result. So from here we could go till here. A very similar case, I got an opportunity to operate. So we could, similar case, isolated deformity of the intermediate crust. Now coming to very, very thick skin, bulbous tip. Now there is no way that you can actually, whenever you are reducing the cartilage, whatever, after how much ever augmentation, there is going to be some dead space. So you have to use a suture to reduce the dead space. So this is a suture to reduce the dead space in the supratip area. So this suture is called as a supratip suture. This is taken similar to the, you have to pass a 24 gauge needle, and then you have to take a permanent suture. You have to feed the permanent suture to this needle, and then you have to withdraw this needle. Now you have to pass a needle through the point of the maximum dead space in supratip area. Then you pass the needle of the suture around this point. Then you cut the suture, then you cut the needle of the suture and you insert another needle from the columella and feed another end of this suture, which is fed to this 24 gauge needle again. And as you can see here, by pulling this suture, you can obliterate this dead space. You can control this dead space. So it has to be taken very carefully so that it should not cause puckering of the skin. So this is how you deal with the dead space. So in this case, in addition to this suture, there was the bulbosity which was due to space. So we had to take percutaneous suture. So you had to pass a needle similarly, and you had to take a percutaneous suture to deal with this, to get from here to here. Very, very broad nose, thick sebaceous skin, very thick skin, and we could still give her a good shape by means of structural support. Coming to another deformity is like a droopy tip. As you can see here, that is tip is drooping so much, and this is because of the deficient septum. The anterior part of the septum is underdeveloped. So we had to do a total septal reconstruction in this case, and then you have to advance the assembly of lateral cartilages on the top of this total septal reconstruction. So we had to reconstruct this septum and advance the assembly on the top of this. So we could get rid of this tip drooping, and from here we could rotate the tip upwards, and also we could camouflage the deformity of the dorsum. Sometimes you have catastrophic cases like vaginal granulomatosis and a lot of scarring because of the absorption of the septum. So in such cases, you have to put a solid structural costal cartilage graft. And we did a total septal reconstruction and the lateral crural strut graft to give a good shape to the lateral crust. This was also another case of vaginal granulomatosis, which was repaired by total septal reconstruction, and the alar cartilages advanced on the top of this assembly. So this was about the catastrophic cases. Now at times, the skin envelope is so thick or it is so tight that that becomes one of your limitation. This is because the skin has a limited ability to expand. There's a limit beyond which a skin cannot be expanded or stretched due to skin biomechanics. Coming to cases like Binder syndrome and nasomaxillary hypoplasia cases, for an instance. So these have Binder syndrome cases. They generally have the hypoplasia of the entire nose and the maxilla, called nasomaxillary hypoplasia. In such cases, to lengthen the columella, you may have to take a VY advancement incision. So here a VY advancement incision is taken, and as you can see, the septum is very short. So in such cases, you have to use a septal extension graft to increase the length of the nose, or you may have to do total septal reconstruction. And in addition, you also have to augment the premaxilla. So in this case, we augmented the premaxilla with the help of a dice cartilage wrapped in fascia. One piece was kept on the premaxilla and one piece was kept on the dorsum. So here is you have to identify the nasal spine, and then you have to elevate in front of the nasal spine on the maxilla. and then this augmentation is placed over there. It can, nowadays we are fixing this this Tice cartilage wrapped in fascia also. So as you can see here, you can even fix it over the premaxilla. So in this case, we used a septal extension graft. Whatever was coming from behind part of the nose was sutured to the anterior part of the nose. This was what the anterior septal angle. We sutured the entire septum in the front, and then we trimmed it according to the needs, and then the tip cartilages were advanced on the top of this assembly. So we could reach from here to here. And in addition to that, tip grafts were used. So these are Binder syndrome, nasomaxillary hypoplasia cases. We could achieve a good dorsal augmentation of premaxilla, and a good tip projection and tip definition as well. A very typical that they have a horizontally oriented nostrils. From here we could go to vertically oriented, more vertically oriented nostrils. Similar cases of Binder syndrome. Now coming to more catastrophic cases, like now this lady had a motor vehicular accident and multiple facial fractures, and CLW suturing was done. So she also had breathing difficulties, so we accepted her. As you can see here, there is a lot of CLW suturing and various sutures taken. On opening up, the lateral crus was completely severed. There was no lateral crus. So we reconstructed the lateral crus with the help of a graft, and we could get a good result. We also did a dorsal augmentation for this case. Now, scarred skin with skin loss. Now this gentleman had a motor vehicular accident, and there was a skin loss at the left side ala at the lateral crus, and also the soft triangle. So in this case, I had to take an incision inside and reflect the skin outside. And then I went for a composite graft. A composite graft is taken from concha, consisting of a skin and a cartilage, which is more in size as compared to the skin. This was then inserted at the defect and sutured back. And as you can see here, this was the original margin, and we could at least get a 3 millimeter margin. And after that, after this one step, we took him for a rhinoplasty surgery after 6 months, and we could reach from here to here. Secondary rhinoplasty, a primary surgery had an infection. So the patient had a very catastrophic deformity. He was having an upturned nose with a very bad saddling. The columella was also short, and there was no way I could lengthen the columella. So I have to use a composite graft from concha to actually lengthen his columella. So I fashioned the composite graft in such a way that it would be a shield graft for the projection of the nose, and the skin should be oriented horizontally. So I harvested a graft in such a shape that the cartilage was vertically oriented and the skin was horizontally oriented, and then this was sutured in place. And then we took him for a secondary surgery. We reconstructed his dorsum, total septal reconstruction of the dorsum, reconstruction of the lateral crus as well. in addition, and we could get from here to here. We could nicely derotate his nose. We could give him a good projection, but the columella problem still persists. But still, I say that this is not a perfect result, but this is definitely an acceptable result. Now, this is a secondary case in which a primary surgeon had put silicone on the dorsum and silicone on the columella. The silicone on the columella immediately came off, and the silicone on the dorsum is still remaining over there. We removed everything, we reconstructed everything with the costal cartilage graft, and we could get a good result. These are the similar cases. This is a midline cleft of the face with a dermoid. So she was operated once by a plastic surgeon colleague, and she had he has put some dorsal augmentation piece over here. We opened up and we removed such a cartilage. The dermoid which was there, which was still present over there, some part of dermoid was still present, which was removed. Then proper osteotomy was done and tip grafts were used, and we could reach from here to here. And then she never reported again. So these are the last photographs of her that I have. Coming to cleft lip noses. So these are some few revision cleft lip noses. We generally have to, there's a deficiency in cleft lip noses, there's a deficiency of lateral crus on one side. So you have to lengthen the smaller lateral crus by means of a very strong lateral crural stud graft from pyriform aperture to the nasal tip. So here are the few cases. As you can see here, the lateral crus on the left side was deficient, so we released it. We put a lateral crural strut graft, a strong graft, and we could get a good result. Few more cases. ala base surgery. Now, for ala base surgery, you have to consider 2 points. You have to consider the base width and the flaring. Okay, so you have to draw a line passing through the medial canthus downwards. So if the ala base is outside these 2 lines, that means the ala base width is more. And if it is only the matter of ala base width, that can be definitely be dealt with by nostril sill excision. But if there is flaring in addition to this, if the ala is flaring too much, then you may do an ala wedge excision of the ala base. So here is a small video of a combined ala sill and a base resection and reduction. So here I am doing about 5 millimeters of ala sill resection. So this is ala sill resection. So you have to be, whenever you are doing an ala base resection, you have to be careful that your incision should never be in the ala crease, because it is said that only gods create the creases and surgeons can only destroy them. So better not to destroy the creases created by God. We generally take an incision about 1 millimeter above the ala crease so that the crease is not destroyed. And then up to 4 or 5 millimeters resection can be done. And then this is sutured in 2 layers and generally permanent sutures are used for this purpose. So this is ala base and ala sill resection combined. Few examples of ala base and ala sill excision. Now coming to aging rhinoplasty, we've already discussed this case, that due to aging, the tip forces generally droop down, and you have to do a surgery for a breathing difficulty. Now at times, sometimes because of tip drooping due to aging, and if the patient is having other ailments and the patient is not getting surgery for fitness for general anesthesia, then you may do a minimal surgery under local anesthesia. You may just excise the wedge of skin in the radix area. You may undermine the skin on the dorsum and just suture it back together. This also can elevate the tip to some extent and give a patient a little bit of relief from blockage due to the internal nasal valve collapse. So here is an example. Only by taking this suture, we could improve the nasolabial angle, and a little bit of difficulty, breathing difficulty, could be solved. So the advantage of aesthetic rhinoplasty is when the dorsum is higher, your eyes looks become more clearer. And to conclude, the field of rhinoplasty covers a wide array of surgical challenges, both in terms of technical skill and aesthetic judgment. No single maneuver can be applied to all rhinoplasty patients. Only experience tells us how to pair our aesthetic goal with appropriate technical maneuver. Any single suture or graft can have different outcomes in different hands, and especially in long-term follow-up. You should follow sound fundamental principles beginning from the analysis, and that is the cornerstone to success in rhinoplasty career. And being an ENT surgeon, it's our right and moral duty to carry the torch for better rhinoplasty and let no one take this away from us. So I cannot thank you before thanking my teacher, Professor Gubesh, and my guru, Dr. Virendra Gaisas. Thank you very much. And I hope with these 3 lecture series, with these 3 lectures, at least I could motivate a few of the colleagues to get into the field of rhinoplasty. So even if one single person, if I could motivate that, then I would consider that my lecture series is successful. And I really thank you very much, and I wish you all the best for the learning curve in your rhinoplasty. So with this, I end my presentation. You can contact me. This is my contact address and the email given over here. So with this, I think we can go to question answers.
Thank you, sir, for an excellent presentation. We hope to see more lectures from you in the future.
It's going to be a pleasure if it comes to teaching.
Yes, sir.
Not a problem. So if the colleagues are having any questions, so they can ask me and we can answer their queries if there are any.
Ma'am, Hina ma'am, are you?
Yeah, I'm just searching. There is a question. So what is your experience on rhinoscleroma?
Rhinoscleroma, see, first of all, any granulomatous disease of the nose, you have to wait till the disease is silent. Let all the deformity take place. The only thing that you can tell them or counsel them in the midst of the active disease, that you can just give them a massage so that the skin contracture does not take place. So for the massage, you have to massage, actually pull the skin on the dorsum and in the supratip area with a force for about 10 minutes twice a day. And when the disease is silent, you have to see what all deformities have taken place, and only after all the deformities have taken place, only after there is no active disease, only then you can accept the patient. Otherwise, the patient may still develop some symptoms or the deformity. After that, whatever deformity is remaining, then you may have to do either a total septal reconstruction, reconstruction of the entire septal framework, and the dorsal augmentation generally that you have to do in such cases. And you also have to strengthen the lateral crust by means of the lateral crural strut grafts.
Yes, sir. So, what exactly do you do in tongue in groove suturing? How do you place the septum in tongue in groove suturing?
In a classical tongue in groove technique, the classical tongue in groove is always a setback. These are the two medial crusts. You have to pull it back and pass a needle through it and pass a needle through the caudal septum. So you have tongue in groove is always a setback, classical tongue in groove. Now, in cases of hidden columella or columella retraction, you may use a septal extension graft, and then you may advance this medial crust and the entire tip cartilage on this septal extension graft. So this is also suturing the medial crust to the extended septum. So this is a modification of a tongue in groove technique. So whenever you are using a tongue in groove technique, you should never use a columella strut. Tongue in groove technique is when you anchor the medial crust to the caudal septum, if it is for setting it back or if it is for pushing it down. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. So there is another question. When do you want to avoid a wedge resection in case of when you're planning to do a alloplasty for a deformed ala? When do you not do a wedge excision?
No, I did not get. I did not understand that question.
When not to do wedge excision in a deformed ala?
If the patient is having a breathing difficulty, means ala sill excision, if they want to say.
Probably, yes, sir.
Yes, if you should, when you should not do ala sill excision. See, as far as ala surgery is concerned, you must remember that less is more. First of all the ala surgery, all the ala procedures that you're doing are irreversible. You must remember this. And the ala surgeries can definitely be done under local anesthesia. You can take him in the office. So in the primary procedure, you should always do less. Now, when not to do ala sill excision is if the patient is having a gross breathing difficulty. You should never do an ala sill excision. And because if you do ala sill excision, then and if you overdo it, then there can be a breathing difficulty. So in cases of breathing difficulty, you should definitely put it for a second surgery.
So what are the various techniques to decrease the nasal flaring?
As I told you that if you want to reduce the ala width, it is the ala sill excision, and if you want to reduce the ala flaring, it is the ala base, and it is the ala base excision.
Yes, sir.
So depending upon that amount of flaring, you have to see, you can use about 4 millimeters to 6 millimeters, sometimes even 7 millimeters of ala base excision and ala sill excision sometimes you have to do.
So how to prevent a step deformity?
In osteotomy?
Yes, sir.
You have to be absolutely in a nasofacial groove. Now you have to understand what is a nasofacial groove. this is your cheek, and this is your nose begins from a point. So you palpate, and this is the point where your cheek ends, and that is the nasofacial groove. So when your cheek ends, that is the nasofacial groove, and that is the point of your osteotomy. Now, if you go by other presumption, and if you make a osteotomy higher up, then you may land up into a step deformity. And now that you have created a step deformity and you still can recognize it on the table, just go below that and do the osteotomy again. The step deformity will be corrected.
So that's it. I think I've asked all the questions.
Interacting with all the colleagues who were interested in rhinoplasty. In all these 3 days, we could see a lot of colleagues who were really interested. I am really thankful to Dr. Shri Harsha and his team and his hospital for creating such an opportunity for interaction with our colleagues, so that it definitely would help of some of them to take up this field of functional and aesthetic rhinoplasty. So thank you very much. So with this, I sign out.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for a excellent 3-day presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Shri Harsha. Thank you, Hina, for the wonderful
Thank you, sir.
lecture, and thank you for wonderful moderation as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity to talk.
Yeah.
Ma'am, we are expecting
Deserve it.
from you soon, ma'am.
Okay. So I sign out now. Thank you so much.